Certainly good to see all of you here today. Thanks for coming out this afternoon. It's quite an honor for me to be kicking off the keynote series here at IT Expo. But I noticed that Rich left off one reason of why you might have come to IT Expo. So how many of you checked the weather forecast in your hometown, the weather forecast at South Beach, and then said, that IT Expo show sounds like a pretty good idea? Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Same for us, by the way. I can't imagine a better place to be this week, considering that the rest of the country is in the deep freeze, than right here at South Beach and at IT Expo. I am Dave Linden. I'm CEO of Digium, and for those of you who don't know Digium, we are a privately held company in Huntsville, Alabama, which, by the way, totally explains why I talk this way. And we are best known for being the creator, the maintainer, and the sponsor of the open source communications project known as Asterisk. Now, being in the open source project space has really had us in the middle of the open source migration of the last few years. And so we have lived and grown up with what's happened in the open source world. In fact, over the last 10 years, I suspect open source has transitioned from something that 10 years ago was a very scary proposition for an corporate IT manager to something today that's relatively mainstream. And with that, we have seen all sorts of new applications being adopted. But still, in many cases, those applications are serving some relatively niche application inside of an IT infrastructure. And what I want to talk about today is, can we really run our businesses on open source software? I'm not talking about in a niche here and there. I'm talking about predominantly running our business on open source. And I'm not talking about non-mission critical applications. I'm talking about the most demanding, most mission critical applications you have in your company. Now, I'm a guy that normally likes to jump straight to the bottom line, so I'm going to go ahead and answer the question. Yes, we can. Any questions? No, okay, I'm kidding. That's clearly my opinion, but I'd like to take the next few minutes and see if I can convince you that it should be your opinion as well. I guess before we spend time trying to understand if we can run our company on open source software, we should at least ask the question of why we want to do that. And in fact, Gartner studied this question, and the number one response that came back from the respondents was they do this because they want to save money. In fact, the Standish Group produced a report that estimated that the adoption of open source software can account for about $60 billion in savings by IT users across the world. The number two reason that was reported is protection from a particular vendor, quote, owning your IT infrastructure. And the third reason was the ease of customization. I had the distinct pleasure of spending some time with Mark Penn last week. Mark is the author of a book called Microtrends. And Mark's premise is that our economy is being driven by hundreds of small microtrends as opposed to one or two large megatrends. And part of what's driving those microtrends is the concept of personalization and customization, and what's driving that concept is the fact that the internet has enabled people with like interests to find themselves and create demand for these types of like interests. In fact, if you can put 1 million people together with a similar interest, that's a reasonable size market, even though it's only 1/3 of 1% of the people that live in the United States. Open source is the tool that enables those trends to permeate into business. Being able to customize your IT infrastructure to run your business the way you want to run it is possible in the advent of open source era.